Good. So,
Okay.
well, I thought that since the anniversary is coming up, April 1st, that was the day Dad asked you out, right? Wasn't it April Fool's Day?
Yep. That was first time Dad formally asked me out.
Yeah. And did you
He
take it?
made several attempts before that,
Oh, yeah.
and I made several attempts before that. Um, I had graduated from nurses training the previous September, and he had been dating a classmate of mine. I wouldn't call her a friend of mine, but I would call her a classmate of mine. And she left to go home to another boyfriend,
Well,
which was in Wyoming. And so Jody Bashersky, whom I'm sure you don't remember very well, but she and I were good friends following graduation. I'd never known her very well in nurses training, but after nurses training. So anyway, she came up to me one day and we were living in the same house, and she said, there's an interesting thing happened. Kay just went home and left Bob Ortwine all by himself. And I was looking at the two of you, and I think you'd make a very good couple. What do you think? And I said, sure, whatever. And I was open. I had nothing else going on in my life. And so we had a Christmas party. That was our first year there. And we had a Christmas party. And Dad came with another girl,
uh-oh.
which I totally opposed. But anyway, he was there, and we'd never dated or anything. So, it wasn't really a big deal. But he came with this other girl, and I kind of looked at him and I said something snotty, I'm sure, to him, and then went on. And he took the girl home and came back after he
Ah.
took the girl home. So I chased him around all night, and he left, and then the following day he went back to Montana for a Christmas vacation. So I didn't see him until he came back, and then he called me right after he got back, and he said, "Hey, I've been gone for a while, and my car is having a hard time. I had to restart the battery and charge the battery and stuff, and I'd like to keep it running for a while. You want to charge my battery with me?" And I
Oh,
said, "Of course not."
yeah, that doesn't sound too romantic.
So I said, "No, thank you," and we hung up. And then I had an alumni dance from our school, and so I was going. So I called all over town and left my name for him to call, and he already had a date to that dance.
Man, yeah.
So then I had left my name all over town, so I couldn't call anybody else to go to the dance with. But I finally found somebody that hadn't heard about Bob or me or whatever. So we did that, and then I don't know. There was another event that I invited him to, and he said he had a problem, and so we didn't go out until um, April 1st. And I was working, and he was a student physician, so he came up to the floor. This was a teaching floor that I was on, so he came up to the floor and he made rounds with the doctor, and then the doctor left and all the other students left, and he came over to the desk where I was charting, and he said, "Would you like to go out tonight, see a movie?" And I said, "Oh, that'd be fun. Okay, what time?" And he told me. So I worked the rest of the day, and we always had to work overtime in that one floor because it was always so busy. And so anyway, I worked a little bit overtime, got home, started to hurry to get ready for the date, and I sat down and had dinner and was smoking a cigarette, which I was doing at the time, smoking. Anyway, I had a cigarette, and I'm sitting there, and I thought, "Oh, he's not going to come. This is April Fool's Day. Oh, why was I so stupid running around here trying to get ready?" And so I just sat there and had a cigarette and didn't think about it. And we were talking, and all of a sudden there's a knock on the door.
Uh,
And so I said, "Oh my God, he is here, I think. Somebody go answer the door." And I mean, I'm sitting there with my uniform on, my white nylons, my white nurse's shoes, everything except the cap, just about, and a cigarette. And he comes in the door in a suit and tie, which was very unusual for Dad, as you know now. But anyway, I ran upstairs and changed clothes, and we went to the movie, and we went there for ever after.
yeah. Do you remember what
But
movie it was?
I have no idea. It was a really good old movie, but I can't remember what it was now. I'll have to look that up.
So this was after or kind of in the middle of your nurses training. You were both kind of interns, I guess you could say.
No, I was not. I was a graduate nurse, and actually, I had been there for at least a year. And
This is in Omaha, right? I mean, just
yeah, in Omaha, Creighton University. The hospital is Creighton Memorial St. Joseph's Hospital, named after Count Creighton.
Count Creighton.
And we were the hospital and the nursing education classes that Creighton chose for their Bachelor of Science degree in nursing. After, for 3 years we went to school, and we went to school on the floor, and we worked on the floor, and actually we controlled the hospital pretty much at night, we student nurses. And so I had graduated, I'd been there a year, and most of the physicians, of course, knew me because I made rounds with them and all that kind of stuff. And so for a few months after we were engaged, the following, I don't know, it was June, something like that, we were engaged.
That was a quick engagement then. I mean,
Yes, it was. And it was because I was so egotistical that when he called and he said something about, I don't know, becoming engaged, and did you tell everybody? I thought he was proposing. And I misinterpreted a little bit, because I thought I was so beautiful and so wonderful that of course he would propose after only 2 months, but that probably wasn't quite the purpose. But anyway,
we hit it off. It was on April Fool's Day, and you were engaged by June.
Well, the end of June or July 1st.
Well, either way, that's pretty quick.
Yeah, I know.
But you just knew, huh? I mean, was it not, if not love at first sight, love right away, it sounds like.
Well, I had been interested. I met him when he was dating my classmate, and he doesn't remember that, but I met him when he was a freshman. And I had always been kind of
in college, or no? So a freshman at medical school, and
freshman medical school. Yeah.
When he was about 22 or 23, something like that.
Yeah, 22, probably 21. He graduated from pre-med in 3 years. They allowed them to do that at that time. And so he took advantage of that because, of course, tuition was cheaper if he graduated in 3 years instead of 4. And so he came down to Creighton, and he was on the floor, and that's where I met him when he was a freshman. And I was always kind of interested in him. And I think maybe he was interested in me, but we never really, had anything to do with each other. We didn't see each other often. He was in a different part of town, and so was I. So I didn't see him very often. And then when he was a student and coming up on the floor, I got to know him better, and we went out and all that kind of stuff.
Great, neat. And so you knew each other since you were what, 2 years younger than him, right?
Yep, I was 21. He would have been 23 or 24.
Okay, so wow, so handsome young guy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was very handsome.
I mean, if you don't mind my asking, did you date very much when you were in college and undergrad and nursing school?
I dated a lot. Yes, I did. I dated a lot of guys, and he probably thought I was wild and crazy, and so he wanted to get to know me better or something. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah, Dad always told me you were hard to approach because you were always with somebody else.
Yeah, well, that was at his fraternity house, not in general. But anyway.
So you would go see him at a fraternity house?
We had a mutual friend. I know you know the name, Lee Bevilacqua, who was a really good friend of ours. And I knew him first, actually, when I was a freshman in nurses training. I don't know how I met him or where I met him for the first time, but he would call the nurses' dormitory and ask for me. And then when I get on the phone, hey, Shanka, bring over some girls. Let's have a party. And I'd say, okay. And we'd do that. We'd go over there and have a party. So then he met Bob, and he was a good friend of ours as well. The thing that Dad didn't like a lot was when he was on the floor, because I'd been there so many years. Well, I'd been there a couple of years by the time I got to know him very well. He got called Dr. Shanka a lot. So he didn't appreciate that too much, but he became very well known. He was a very good pediatric resident. And, when he was a pediatric resident, which was some years later, he was the only pediatric resident. And so he was on call all the time. And he even said, as I had said before, you got a great education at Creighton because we drew from a huge area and saw a lot of very different things that most people didn't see until they'd been in practice for a while, probably. So anyway, he got a good education there, and I did too, and it was great.
Great, great.
Yep.
And so what's like dating like for a young woman at this time when you're in college and when you're in grad school? I mean,
Well,
I've always,
I was in our school of nursing at the time was very strict. If you had to work at 7 o'clock the next morning, you had to be in at 10 o'clock the night before.
yeah.
So
And this
that
is
was
Catholic college, right, Creighton?
this is nurses training, which wasn't college yet. If you wanted to get a bachelor's degree at that time, you went for 3 years of nurses training, and then you went for 2 years of college.
Okay.
So we didn't really go, as they said in the olden days, up on the hill where Creighton was for our classes. We just went our freshman year, part of the first part of the freshman year, and then we all the rest of our training was at the hospital or thereabouts.
Okay. And so at the so you were basically in a dorm for other nursing students. Would that be the best way to
We
describe
were
it?
in we were all in a dormitory attached to the hospital of
Oh,
all things, so
yeah.
that if you had to work the next day, they knew where you'd been the night before. You had to check in at 10 o'clock.
So-
And they also said it was because of emergencies in case an A bomb hit Omaha. We'd be very handy to run into the hospital and take care of people. That's what they said. I don't know exactly why we were attached to the hospital, but that's what they said.
So it's almost like you're at their beck and call, sort of.
Pretty much, yeah.
Mhm.
And we had a nun. Her name was Sister Mary Lewis, and every Christmas, we were not allowed. We didn't have telephones in the room. Of course, we had one telephone per floor.
Yes.
So when you heard the telephone ring, somebody in the hallway or wherever that heard the phone ring answered it and called the person to the phone that was supposed to be called to the phone. And we were not allowed to smoke in our rooms, though we did. And we had to keep them neat and tidy. And every Christmas, before we'd leave for Christmas vacation, Sister Mary Lewis would make the rounds of all the rooms. And she'd get furious at us because it would be messy. We'd be packing, for God's sake. And she'd pull out the drawers and empty them on the floor and say, "Here, pack this right." And I'd think, oh my God in heaven. But I got to know her very well because I was not a normal student. I just thought things should be done right, and they often weren't. So I'd go complain. But we had Omaha was hot in the summertime, and we had no air conditioning in the dormitory. It was hard to sleep, and the poor kids who worked nights would have a tough time sleeping during the day because it'd be so hot. So I went down and asked her for air conditioning. I said I had taken care of a patient, the poor man. I'd given him the first shot I ever gave anybody, and it took me forever to get that shot in because I just couldn't do it. It was just too hard. I just couldn't imagine doing it, and I did it, but he must have been in pain for several minutes because it took me several minutes to get the stupid thing in. Anyway, he was my patient, and he ran a rental store. So I talked to him. He said, you guys must be roasting over there in the dormitory because it doesn't look like you got any air conditioning in the windows or anything. I mean, we couldn't have a general air conditioner because it wasn't built into the hospital. So if we had an air conditioner, it would be in the window. And so I said, yeah, it's roasting. And he said, why don't you come down to the rental shop and I'll give you a cheap air conditioner on sale. And I said, great, I will do that. So I went down and asked Sister Mary Lewis, and she said, I don't think so. And I said, come on, it's roasting in this place. I could you several air conditioners for a good price. She said, well, go talk to Sister. I can't remember her name right now. Didn't think I'd ever forget it. Anyway, she was the head of the hospital and the school of nursing, sort of. So I went to talk to her, and she said no. And I didn't understand why, but of course, the electricity would never have been supported.
Yeah.
Or would not have supported air conditioners. So we didn't get the air conditioner, but Sister Lewis remembered me after that. And she'd always come to me, not always, once in a while, she'd come to me with a problem, and because she knew me. So I kind of got to be known because I was kind of a rebel without a cause.
Jeez, Mom. Yeah, I bet you were smoking in that room of yours all the time.
Oh, we were.
Yeah. And So one phone for how many girls then? How many girls are on each floor?
Probably 25 on the floor.
Jeez. So one phone between 25 girls. That sounds
Yeah,
hard. Like,
it was hard. And you
so
did
like,
talk very long.
yeah. And
And it was
so,
a payphone, so if you called somebody, you had to pay for it.
yeah, wow. So I'm guessing there were fights here and there, but someone spending too much time on the phone or something like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Get
because if the
off the
line was tied
phone.
up, there wasn't any way somebody could leave a message or anything. I
Oh,
mean,
of course not. Not none of those modern things yet.
so basically, if you were really anticipating a call, you kind of literally waited by the phone, I guess, and
No, you just
no,
somebody called your name out and you went to the phone. That's it.
someone just yelled down the hall or something like that.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So, and we also had 2 bedroom rooms and 4 bedroom rooms, 4 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And so we had a 4 bedroom, though there were only 3 of us that were usually there. But we had what we called affiliates who came to St. Joe's. St. Joe's was a big hospital at the time. It was 1,000 beds. And so most of the closed schools of nursings in other cities came to St. Joe's, especially for the psychiatric training, because not many people had a psychiatric hospital. I mean, not many hospitals had a psychiatric unit. So they came for that. We had only a few of those. And it was the funniest thing because after Dad and I were married, we went to Montana to, be with the folks and have a reunion. And we got there and somebody said, "Hey, come on, Bobby, let's go down to the Two Dot Bar and have beer." And I said, "Oh, wait, I got to change my pants." They said, "Oh no." I mean, my jeans were holy jeans, and at the time that was not in style. And so I said, "Oh, I've got to change my pants at least." And they said, "No, no, come on, let's go." So we went and we walked into this bar, and here was one of the two associates that had been in our room.
Wow.
And she despised us. She would come in at 8 o'clock and go to sleep. And I mean, we didn't go to sleep until 12 o'clock at night, the three of
Yeah.
us. But she had to pull the covers over her head and go to sleep.
Yeah.
Anyway, she wasn't too fond of seeing me there that day.
So I'm guessing no boys are allowed in this dorm.
Oh, absolutely not. Not above the first floor.
So
And
then,
when
good.
you, so when somebody came to get you for a date, they had to go into the office, and there was an intercom on every floor, and the secretary in the office of the dormitory would call up on the intercom and say, "Miss Shanka, you have a visitor." And you'd go down the first floor and pick up your date and go.
So in other words, it was literally announced whenever you had a date.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, but it's kind of a point of pride. I'm guessing from the way Dad tells it, your name was announced over the loudspeaker a lot. So,
Well, he wouldn't know, he wasn't there.
well, I don't know. Still, I mean, on the other hand, it sounds pretty safe.
Yeah, it was. It was good. Nurses training was great. I think we had one of the best schools of nursing, and I have talked to a lot of women. I think the only time I felt challenged with my education was when we were in Thailand, and I worked for the Army hospital, and the Army nurses, of course, had been in Vietnam and done everything. They did tracheotomies and God knows what else.
Yeah, yeah.
And but they were very good nurses, and that was the only time I felt challenged. I felt we had a very good education back in the old days.
Did anybody ever maybe sneak a boy into their room or anything? Or
Oh, I'm sure somebody did, but I didn't know about it.
so, yeah,
None of us knew about it if it happened, I don't think.
yeah. So the nuns pretty much ran the whole show. It sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. They were German Franciscan nuns, and some of them were still from Germany. They had accents and stuff, but they were very good nurses. Yeah.
So they were nurses as well as nuns. They had nurses training.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
They ran the hospital, and they had to have the education to run the hospital. That was a law in the state.
Huh. Well, you would hope so, but yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know that they were. So basically, they've been through the convent and through nurses training. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They would have worn the traditional black and white habit at that time.
absolutely. They wore a white habit most of the time because they were nurses, and we had to wear white on the floor.
Yeah.
White nylons, white shoes, white uniform, white cap, everything.
Yeah, you would have worn the traditional nurse's outfit. They don't really wear that anymore. So
No, they don't. They don't
yeah.
wear the cap. The cap's been gone for a lot of years.
And essentially all nurses are female and pretty much all doctors are men, correct? Like at this point?
Right. At that time, Dad had a female student in his class. Claire Vizard was her name. And she was the only female student in the 4 years of medical school. And there was a male student nurse, but the first one, the only one in our school of nursing. And I don't think he was actually in our school of nursing. He was in another school, but he came through the hospital for a couple of things of training, a couple of weeks of training, maybe once in a while. And he was a friend of one of my roommates. And so I knew of him, but I didn't, he was pretty insignificant because you're the only male student. And then, when I was working later in life after you were in high school, I was working at Sienna Center, and we had I don't know, 3 or 4 student nurses who came, male student nurses who came through that, retirement home where I worked, that nursing home. And I kind of thought maybe the old ladies wouldn't like that a whole lot. So I went around and asked them, how do you feel about having a man take care of you? And they said, great, because he can lift me up and he can put me in the wheelchair, and there's it's no hard getting out of bed. It's very easy to get out of bed when he's holding on to me because he's strong, and I love it. So it was good.
Great, great.
Yep.
Neat. But at the point that you and Dad started dating, you were living in an apartment with a friend, it sounds like, or?
I was living in an apartment, in a house with 6 girls. We rented a whole house from a nurse who worked on the first floor of the hospital. And I don't know how she heard of, maybe somebody worked with her that was in the house. I don't know. I can't remember anymore, but we got this lovely home. And there were 3 bedrooms. So it was like 2 kids to a bed. And it was a great, great house. And on your day off, you had to cook. It was a great arrangement. We had 6 kids and we could afford the rent and afford groceries. And it was good because there were 6 of us.
Cool. It sounds fun.
Yeah, it was good.
All right. Well, neat. Well, that was kind of my question for the day, the fateful day that kind of gave birth to my existence, I guess you could say. So, all right.
Yep.
Well, yeah, well, fun, Mom. Well, that's all I have for today, and I'll call you in a little bit.
Okay, sounds good.
All right.
See you later. Thank you.
Later. Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.